This is the second video in a series of videos that are being used to train our children's and youth workers at Calvary Baptist Church. Thank you for taking the time to watch it, and I want to encourage you to watch carefully and absorb all that you can. Child abuse is a very important issue, and the state of Pennsylvania is a leader in providing resources for child safety. This website is very useful and helpful and contains a lot of information. You might want to jot it down so that you can go there later to find out even more about this important topic. What is child abuse? It's a topic that we really don't like to talk about, but it's one that's very necessary. Oftentimes we think of child abuse and we think of physical abuse or sexual abuse. But child abuse can also include the neglect of children. It can include emotional abuse. It can include domestic violence. And it can include the exploitation and trafficking of children. Children are very precious to us at Calvary, and so it breaks our heart to read some of the statistics about what's happening. About 5 children die every day from child abuse. In 2017, there were 1,720 children who died from abuse and neglect. There is a report of child abuse made every 10 seconds. We need to be alert, and we can't be naive when it comes to child abuse. So we want to keep our eyes open, but we want to encourage you to err on the side of caution. It's a very important thing to make an observation that leads to an accusation, but we want to make sure there's very clear evidence that there is actually abuse taking place. This clear evidence, if it's there, then we are mandated to report in the state of Pennsylvania. So let's talk about what we mean by child abuse. First of all, physical abuse. The deliberate physical injury of a child, or the failure to prevent physical injury or suffering. Some examples might be hitting, shaking, throwing children, burning, scalding them, poisoning them. And indicators that may show up: injuries or burns, especially in unusual places. When asking the child about the injuries, they refuse to explain, or the explanations just don't really make sense for the type of injury that they have. Sometimes children are fearful of physical contact after being abused. Sexual abuse involves forcing, manipulating, or enticing a child to take part in any form of sexual activity. We may most often think about physical sexual abuse or rape, but it could also include non-contact activities, such as forcing a child to look at sexual images. Some indicators that this might be taking place would be children using language that's really inappropriate for their age, or drawing images that are sexually explicit, or sometimes children regress to a younger age and behavior when they're being sexually abused. We need to be on the lookout for signs that children are being abused. And here are some physical symptoms or signs that we may see: lacerations or bruises, irritation, pain or injury to genital areas, difficulty with urination, difficulty with and discomfort when sitting, torn or bloody underclothing, or sexually transmitted diseases. There are also behavioral signs. Be alert for children having nightmares, or anxiety when approaching the church or nursery area, or a place where they have been abused. Notice and nervousness or hostility toward adults, being sexually self-conscious, being overtly sexual in their behavior, withdrawing from activities or friends, and aversion to touch or aversion to the opposite sex. Now, some of these things in themselves don't indicate some sort of abuse happening, but when we look at them all together, we begin to wonder if something is happening, and so we're more aware. Notice also verbal signs. Children rarely lie about this type of thing, so if they say things like, I don't like so-and-so, that may be something that we want to pursue. So-and-so does things to me when we're alone, or I don't like being alone with so-and-so. So-and-so fooled around with me, or this person hurts me. If we have a child saying these types of things, then we must be very much aware and ask more questions. Now, as we mentioned, we often think of physical or sexual abuse when we think of abuse, but neglect is also a form of abuse. This is the persistent failure to meet a kid's needs, physical or psychological. And so examples would be withdrawing or not giving help that a child needs, or a lack of food or water, or failure to receive proper medical attention. Some indicators would be that children are hungry or thirsty, they're unclean or have inadequate clothing, they have untreated medical needs, or they have a severe lack of hygiene. Keep your eyes open for these types of things so that we can help the children. Now, emotional abuse is real, but it's much more subjective. Examples would be withholding love and care, or conveying to children that they're worthless or inadequate, causing a child to frequently feel frightened. These are all examples of emotional abuse. Some indicators of severe emotional abuse might be delays in their development, or having a child who continuously belittles themselves, or extreme fears of new situations. It seems unthinkable to entertain the idea that exploitation could be happening here near our church, but the reality is that it does happen. Be on the alert. Child labor, slavery, and child trafficking are examples. Indicators would include skipping school, or behavior that's very sexualized, or unexplained gifts or possessions. We want to also be aware of other types of harm, including domestic violence, bullying, alcohol and drug abuse, and self-harm. Let's all be alert and help the children so that we're aware of possible things that can harm them. This concludes the second video in our series, which is Training for Child Protection. There is one short video remaining. Thank you for your time and investment in our children.